Our next panel, the no longer silent majority, what Iranians inside want, will explore the perspectives and desires of Iranians living inside Iran, shedding light on their voices and aspirations. Should I keep going? Yeah. Discussing this important topic are Camelia and Entekhabifard, author and editor-in-chief of Independent Persian, the first international newspaper published in Persian. Saeed Ghasseminejad, a senior Iran and financial economics advisor at FDD, specializing in Iran's economic and financial markets and Mufti advisor. And Alex Vatanka, head of Iran program at the Middle East Institute. The panel will be moderated by Dr. Patrick Clawson, senior fellow, research director, and head of the Iran program at Washington Institute. Please welcome our speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The panel is beginning now.
Thank you all for coming. Let's see. Hopefully it just comes on.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The panel is beginning now.
Great. So, So the point of this panel is to discuss how do Iranians feel about the regime, about events in the region, and about the West. Let's start with what do you think is the view inside Iran about how things have gone over the last year of protests? What do you think is the feeling about what's been accomplished out of those protests, and what are the lessons to be gained out of those protests, and what are the views inside Iran about how the United States and the West in general have reacted to those protests?
Thank you for having me here. Let me just give you a background on the protests in Iran. We have had 3 waves of protests since 2017. This is a movement, I call it the patriotic revolutionary movement. It's revolutionary because it wants to overthrow the regime. For decades, the dominant discourse in Iran, political discourse, was reform. Since 2017, what we have seen was that there was a structural break from reform to revolution. It's patriotic because unlike the 1979 revolution, it wants to focus on the national interests of Iranians, what's good for Iranians. It doesn't want to export revolution. It doesn't want to liberate the laborers of the world. It doesn't want to spend Iranian resources for the Ummah. So that's a patriotic revolutionary movement. We had it in 2017, we had it in 2019, and we had it in 2022. And these 3 waves of protests, which were really big, they were in all Iranian provinces. And these 3 waves have been connected with these smaller waves in between. So every year almost you had some kind of protest. The movement has become more radical over years, more violent both by the regime and both by the protesters, more nationalist. And what we saw in 2022, which was very important, was that for the first time, we have seen that you had a fusion of the upper middle class and the lower income class. So the movement in 2017 was mostly in lower income class. In 2019 also was mostly in lower income class. And something that's very important, and many in the West, because it's not being covered, I think don't understand it, is how much anti-79 revolution this movement is, and how much pro-Pahlavi is. So, and this is what I'm saying is based on data. It's not based on what I like or what I feel. So, one of the key slogans of this revolution since 2017 has been Reza Shah, bless your soul. So you have heard it again and again. You have heard other slogans in defense of the Pahlavi dynasty. And that's, we hear a lot about leadership. This person should be leader, that person should be leader. And the only name that has come so far in Iran, people during the protests have chanted that name, is the name of Pahlavi. And that's something we have seen in the data. I can actually go over some of this data for you, if I have time. Okay.
Let's move on to other topics, please.
Yeah.
So, Camelia, can you talk about how do people inside Iran view the reactions of the United States in particular and the West in general towards the protests of this last year? And what's been the reaction of Iranians to what's now the second Iranian who's won the Nobel Peace Prize in the last 20 years? And so what's been the response to the Peace Prize to Mohammadi?
Thank you very much for hosting me, and greetings to all these distinguished panelists and dear friends and everyone else who are here. Very good question, and it has so many speculation around of your question coming up since last summer and the death of Mahsa Amini. Nobel Peace Prizes, let me just get to this question. It was an absolutely a very big awards and a great recognition by international community for all the Iranians, not only to Ms. Mohammadi, and astonishing to see in 20 years for the second time, the second Iranian woman have received this award. I'm little skeptical to say, so what the first Nobel Peace Prize does and done for the Iranian woman, for the people of Iran. And let's see if the second one can make that changes we are looking for. I hope it wouldn't be only a political awards, because Iranian women or all Iranian people in the past 12 months ago, they spent so much with their life and about their freedom and about the children has been killed and some people lost their eyes. I hope it wouldn't be just a small gesture from the international community, which they haven't had any much else to offer to the Iranians, to support them stronger. At the middle of the protests in Iran, we heard and we knew that the United States were negotiating with the regime over releasing some of the hostages or releasing some of the money frozen in the international bank accounts. And it was heartbreaking for many Iranians when they learned, when they were protesting at the street, at the same time, the US representative or the Western representative negotiating with these regime people. And there were so many divisionist people during that 10 to 12 months comes to the picture. The people who tried to make some of the issues which never, ever in Iran being an issue, they've just put that all on the picture, such as the ethnic issues, religious, minority, majority. I am a person like many others at this room, born and grown in Iran. I even never could remember or never asked if any of our neighbors were Muslims or not. And in fact, I had lots of Armenian and Zoroastrian neighbors in our neighborhood in Shahrara. We sometimes learn at the school when the school principal asked some of those students to leave the classroom during the Islamic thought, and we maybe just learn at that time, oh, okay, they are not Muslim. Iranians are very relaxed about these issues. Even as of today, not so many Iranians know Mahsa Amini or Majid Reza Rahnavard, Mohammad Mehdi Karami. Those people who lost their life, have they been Muslim? Have they been Sunni or Shia? No, you guys don't know. Iranian doesn't know. Maybe some people who are in the human rights activism, they knew exactly they're religious. I try to say those things portrayed in international media, and unfortunately, by some of the activists, it makes this division, which Iranian message hasn't been delivered abroad at the way Iranians were looking for, or the ethnicity issue, or if some Kurds or Baluch or Turks, they were complaining about the Fars and about the oppression they have received during these years, or 50 years, 60 years in Iran. They haven't had this fresh memory of contemporary history in Iran, which Qajar dynasty ruled Iran over 100 years. All of them were Turk descent, and never in Iran they imposed everyone speak Turkish, or they never banned people speaking Farsi. Each person, anyone from any city, any tribes, they were free to speak their mother languages at home. And of course, we have one language to make all Iranians can communicate with each other, and it was Farsi, and it was Farsi for 1,000 and 2,000 years. Those small things, but big issues for international community, maybe make them confused and misunderstood about a real goal of the Iranian people. They were all united to make the regime changes, and the slogans from south to north, east to west, all people were united, and they were not complaining about each other, or the separatists were fighting another one. They were just asking for regime change, about unity, and they were mourn each of the dead from south the same time and with the same power in north. For example, when Mahsa killed, and she was from Kurdistan, at the same time, this small child, Kian Pirfalak from south, from Khuzestan, when he killed, I believe the nation mourned and grieved the same way for Mahsa and Kian the same way. Those things, I'm not seeing it as like accidentally popped up on international media or among of some of the fake activists. Maybe they have this idea, which this idea many times over many years trying Iran to divide Iran, to make the country become small pieces to tear up, but they haven't succeeded. And I believe it was another great example, that current uprising in the past 12 months ago, which Iranians more than ever are united, and their goal is so clear. They want democracy, they want to live with each other peacefully next to each other, and one nation, one Iran, and handed over power to a person who that person loves Iran, loves that all Iranian ethnicities with this diversion of the ethnicities, and also to work for the Iranians. That was probably the best things I can portray to you about what I learned as a journalist and running the newspaper of last year events. And back to the Nobel Peace Prizes, I believe that was a beautiful award. We are so grateful and thankful, and all of us are very happy with Mohammadi and also all Iranian people, but I don't want to see that if they has been given to her as a small gesture to say, oh, we haven't forgotten Iranian people, here you are, take this prize. Prize have to have an impact and support. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I may ask you, Alex, Camelia said that many Iranians were disappointed that at the same time of the protests, Western countries were negotiating with Iran. So what do you think is going to be the reaction? I'd be interested in you commenting on that. And then also, what do you think is going to be the reaction to the announcement today that the $6 billion of funds which came from South Korea, now in Qatar, are not going to be available to Iran for the foreseeable future?
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you to Nufti for inviting me. Just want to make sure, my reaction in the first part to the Nobel Peace Prize going to Narges Mohammadi?
Well, and in general to the fact that the West was negotiating with Iran at the same time that Iranians were protesting.
Look, obviously it's a beautiful thing that this Nobel Peace Prize was given to another Iranian woman. That's a fantastic achievement. We should all be proud. I am, and everyone I'm sure is proud. But the question is, where does this fit in as part of a strategy? And I'm not sure if I can see that strategy. That, I think, has been the issue for a lot of us Iran watchers for some time. What is the overall Western strategy? If you really push me right now, said, what is the American strategy? I will struggle to come up with pointing that that's the American-Iran policy that's going to play itself out next couple of years, and that's the end goal. Now, I know it's easier said than done, but I think if you ask someone like Vladimir Putin or someone in China today, President Xi, they are more likely to have a long-term strategy for where they want to see the Islamic Republic of Iran as part of their global competition for power vis-a-vis the United States and the West in general. I'm not sure if the United States is there. In this wonderful town, we live in Washington, D.C., where you are on Iran depends whether you talk to Republicans and what kind of Republicans do you talk to, the isolationist Republicans versus the non-isolationists. And among the Democrats, you also have some internal issues in terms of where human rights fits in and so forth. So, you know, when we're talking about specific steps that the West takes, and obviously the Nobel Peace Prize is given by committee in Norway, it's not necessarily a reflection of an American or a Western policy. But even if it was, the question is, where does it fit in? And I'm not sure if I know where that long-term strategy is, and I think the cynics in Iran would say, to your point, Patrick, that the negotiations going on, that we shouldn't wait for the West. We shouldn't wait for the outside world to come with the solution to our problem, the problem being the existence of the Islamic Republic and its policies and the repression and so on. So that's how I would answer it. In many ways, it ties into the issue of leadership that Saeed brought up. You know, putting aside the Iranian diaspora for a minute, what I think was very disappointing, not surprising, but disappointing was, given the intensity of the killings that's going on at the hands of the Islamic Republic over the last half a decade plus now, you would have thought at some point someone inside the Islamic Republic, the so-called Nizam, would stand up and say, enough is enough. I know there are folks who say that, but where's that anger going? How is it being channeled? How is it becoming an internal, within Iran's borders, problem for the regime? And that's not, unfortunately, happening. So you have these angry people on social media, television, so on, describing how disappointed they are about 1979 having failed as a revolution, but they don't know where to go. And that leadership is missing. And if you look into someone like Mohammad Khatami, well, good luck to you. He doesn't really have a vision. I mean, the last we heard from Mohammad Khatami was he fully came on board in terms of what Hamas has just done to Israel. So that's one of the issues as well. Internally, where's the younger generation? I mean, the first generation revolutionaries are in their 70s, 80s, and plus, if you're Ahmad Jannati, almost reaching 100. Where are the younger demographics? Who is going to come in? If you, for a second, and I'm not saying I believe in the reform movement, but if you were somebody who believed in the reform movement, right now you have no hope that anything internally can happen. And I think that's really a key message for the rest of the world, who might sit there and say, well, the Iranian people have to solve it themselves. Well, here you go. They don't actually know how to go about it. And the way you can maybe help them is going to be a tricky set of challenges. But the point I'm making is they need help in the sense that it could come from the diaspora and perhaps foreign civil society organizations and so forth. But let me stop there, Patrick.
If I can say something about the Nobel Peace Prize. So like everyone, I'm happy for Narges Mohammadi. She spent a lot of years in and out of prison over the last few years. And she has done a lot for what she believes. And second, this is clearly a recognition of what the Iranian women have done over the last year and what the Iranian people have done. But I was in Iran when Shirin Ebadi got her prize, and the people were really enthusiastic. I haven't seen that enthusiasm this time. I think one reason can be what Camelia and Alex said. The other one, I think, can be the mistake that, for example, the committee members made during the press conference. One of them said, this is something along the lines that this is the recognition that Narges Mohammadi is the undisputed leader of what's going on in Iran, which is someone who has been following Iran, actually mapping the protests, mapping the slogans. That's absolute nonsense. No one has called her name during the protest. And I think another thing we have to consider, and the Nobel Peace Prize is obviously a political prize. And Ms. Mohammadi has a political background that, as I said, we are seeing a patriotic revolutionary movement in Iran, and Ms. Mohammadi's political background is leftist Islamist. So that, I think, makes a lot of people who are active in this revolution a bit worried. Let me talk about something that's happening now, the Israel thing. So, for example, Ms. Mohammadi has been silent on that, and if you go and read what she has said before, she has signed a very strong anti-Israeli statement. That was in the past, people change, but the statement was very strong, saying Israel is involved in anti-human operation, in war crime. And so that was like, I think, 12 years ago, people changed. But another thing is that, like, her husband, Mr. Taghi Rahmani, who is like her de facto spokesperson, he also has very strong anti-Israel views. I think I saw a tweet from him from a few years ago, which he was lamenting that Haj Amin al-Husseini, the Nazi Mufti of Jerusalem, his proposal for Palestine wasn't accepted. So, and when you look at the issue of Palestine in this movement over the last few years, this is one of the pillars of this new revolution. And the anti-Israeli pro-Palestinian policy has been a pillar of the Islamic Republic's policy, the 1979's policy. And that's why I think we haven't seen lots of enthusiasm on that prize.
May I have a comment?
Please.
I wish Islamic Republic was pro-Palestinian, which they are not. They are just pretending they are supporting Palestinian cause. They are supporting terrorist group. That we have to make differences between Palestinians and between a terrorist group such as Hamas or Jihad Islami. And I believe if there would be total peace in the Middle East, if the state of Palestine would create it, there would be not such a group like Hamas, Hezbollah, Jihad Islami, then Islamic Republic can support it, can make funds for them, and because of their existence, still can make the Middle East chaotic as it is today. So I believe if we are all pro-Israel, if we are supporting Israelis, we have to be also pro-creation of the state of Palestine. Once for good, we have to finish this situation in the Middle East, which has been created from this division between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And so that was a little bit, you said, if you like us to talk about Israel and Palestine, just the momentum comes up, I can speak about it. And if you travel to the Middle East, if you live in the Middle East, which I am living in the Middle East partially, traveling back and forth in the past 20 years, I can say even among of the most moderated Arab Muslims, people in the Middle East, there are a sense and there are heart and feeling for the Palestinians. If we want to be part of this area, Iran, I mean, and to live peacefully and have the support for the other nation, like what the late king of Iran has been created. At the same time that Iran had the embassy of Israel in Iran, it has the representative office of the Palestinian inside Iran too. It's good to have both of them. When you have access with both of those people, then the hands for the negotiations, for playing a crucial role, becomes much stronger. And I had a piece written years ago at Le Monde Diplomatique. If the king was alive and if the revolution wouldn't be taking place back to 1979, I haven't had any doubt that the state of Palestine would be created years and years ago, and we haven't had the current situation as we are having today in the Middle East.
I think Alex wants to get into this conversation.
Thanks, Patrick. Very quickly, just because the issue of the conflict came up. Look, as somebody who's been to Israel repeatedly, love the country, love to visit, I wish it all the success in the future. But to Camelia's point, you know, when you travel, as I'm sure some of you have done, in the small geographic size of this country, and you look at, you hear from Israelis about the demographic realities that they have with the Arab component of their population and the Palestinians in Gaza and West Bank, it's really hard to imagine how this situation remain unless there is a political solution to this. And I say this as somebody who, as I said, support the state of Israel. But I think the idea that, you know, the Palestinians are just going to go away, you know, all it does, and for those of us who care, obviously, in terms of the future of Iran, all it does, it gives opportunity for the extremists, for the terrorists out there to take advantage. You know, if you demolish or eliminate Hamas tomorrow, but nothing changes for the people of Gaza and so forth, something else is probably going to come in and fill it. And when that somebody else is going to do that, that foreign entity is likely to be the Islamic Republic of Iran. Right? And I think if you look at the track record of the Islamic Republic of Iran since 1979, you cannot come up with one single example where they could go into a country that was otherwise functioning and was doing well, and their narrative, their message was attractive to a local actor. It doesn't exist. If you start with Hezbollah in Lebanon and go all the way to the Houthis of the last decade, every time they were able to come in and become a player was because there was a security vacuum, there's a failing state, and they took advantage. Otherwise, the Islamic Republic really has a narrative that doesn't sell. It doesn't sell in Iran. Why on earth should it sell in the region? And I think in the United States, the West, all partners need to start thinking, how do you push back? And you can't necessarily do it in a region-wide. That's a colossal undertaking, and we also have to take into account, and we have to be humble. Right now, the United States has just come from 20 years of investments in the region, and frankly, most Americans are wondering, why did we do it? So if you want to do something in the Middle East, it has to be creative thinking, it has to be smart, it has to have support. In this country, so certainly, you've got to try and bring the very doubtful, skeptical American public along.
I think we really don't want to debate Israel-Palestine here, but Israel left Gaza years ago, and they had the opportunity to build a paradise there. They didn't do that for a reason. And if Palestinians in Gaza are, you know, they are so much peace-loving and things like that, why the Egyptians have problem with them? So we don't want to, I just want to go back to how Iranians see the issue of Palestine.
Exactly. Let's talk about the Iranians. That's our main interest.
So,
how do Iranians view the situation?
So the issue of Palestine for Iranians, we see it emerged in the protest movement in 2009. So with the no to Gaza, no to Lebanon, I give my life for Iran. Funny story, Entekhabifard, who is a duke now, he's a mullah. He went on VOA a few days after that and said, no. They are not saying no to Gaza, no to Lebanon. They are saying yes to Gaza, yes to Lebanon. I give my life for Iran. And then it came, it was other chains that have been repeated, like what happened to the oil money? It had been spent on Palestine. پول نفت چی شده؟ خرج فلسطین شده. Other chains, let go of Palestine, do something for us. فلسطین رو رها کن، فکری به حال ما کن. And probably before this flag thing, the flag chant, probably the most controversial one was the Death to Palestine chant that has been chanted in Iran. So the reason that Iranians are chanting these things is that, again, after 1979, the first figure who came to Iran, the first foreign figure, was Arafat. And he was embraced by all the factions of the victorious coalition, from MEK to Khomeini, from the freedom movement to National Front. And it wasn't just that he didn't have any role in that revolution. Many of those people who came and fought with the Shah, many of those armed groups, they have been trained by Palestinians. They actually have fought along Palestinians against the Israelis. So it's not that Iranians, yes, I agree. The good policy for Iran was what Shah was doing, which is having relation with both sides. But the fact is that that Palestinians have played a role in overthrowing the Shah, in toppling the Shah. And that's why Iranians, right now that they are realizing what they lost, they are also turning against Palestinians.
I'd like to change the topic a little bit to how the United States has approached protests in Iran. In 2009, after the contested elections, the Obama administration was quite convinced that Iranian activists did not want support from the West, and that any support from the West would be a kiss of death, and that this would not help the activists. And the Biden people, many of whom were involved in the Obama administration, took a very different attitude to the protests when they started in 2022. And they said that it's important for the West to speak out loudly in favor of human rights in Iran and in support of brave protesters in Iran. So do you think that Iranians see a difference in the approach between 2009 2022? Do you think that either one of those approaches was better than the other? What's your viewpoint about this change from the part of the administration in their attitude towards protests inside Iran? Alex, you want to go first?
Sure,
I
want
to hear from all three of you
Camelia
on
has
this.
to say. Look, I think, again, it's very controversial. I've been getting this question for the last 15 years. I do a lot of teaching for various branches of the U.S. Armed Forces, and that's one of the almost always the question. So what happened with the Obama administration? What did they get right and wrong? Look, what are you in favor for it or not in terms of what happened with the nuclear deal? The Obama administration decided to gamble and go out there and see if they could actually have a dialogue with this Islamic Republic. And they kind of looked and decided that we can't have everything we want to have resolved, like human rights in Iran and so on, but we do care about the nuclear issue, and they focused on that, and that's what they got a deal. But there was a hope in the Obama administration that you could build on this agreement, that you could maybe build on it, and that's where it fell flat, because the Islamic Republic was not interested in building on it. The Islamic Republic basically took the money and ran away. It made no difference in terms of its regional strategy. It stayed the course in terms of support for the proxies. It made no difference to the lives of Iranians inside of Iran in terms of, the repression continued. So basically, I think the Obama administration came in, tried that. The Trump administration
Alex, can I push you a little bit
Sure.
on that? The Obama people would say to you, it was more than that. They would say that the activists inside Iran didn't want help in 2009. And would have regarded the U.S. involvement in 2009 as a kiss of death that would hurt their cause. What do you think of that argument?
I have no idea of knowing whether having the United States on your side would have been the decisive moment for the movement in Iran. And by the way, in 2009, what is very different from today, as you know, 2009 was remarkable because it was an inside the family fight. You had the Mousavis of this world. These were children of the revolution, and they fell out. And Rafsanjani, as you know, is still alive. That's very different than today because it's coming from the streets up. This is not an internal regime fight. This is angry Iranians coming out. So that, in that sense, is different. So, but Patrick, to be honest with you, I don't know. I haven't seen the evidence in terms of folks saying to the Obama administration, don't do anything. I'd be skeptical. I think the reason why President Obama had secretly sent a couple of letters to Khamenei through the Omanis and wasn't willing to ruin that track that he had already started and just didn't know. And you have to forgive the Americans for this. You've seen repeated protests in Iran the last 44 years. And they look at the track record and say, well, there will be protests, but we don't know. Most likely it's going to be wrapped up by the regime. So if you're Obama in 2009, you got to worry about the nuclear issue, and you have to maybe gamble on going with the Iranian protesters. And they decided to go with the regime. And I think, frankly, in some ways, that's where we are today. I hate to say it, but I mean, the Biden administration might speak the language of support, but in reality, they're trying to focus on what matters the most to them, which is the nuclear program.
Sure. I believe that no matter is Obama or Biden in power, they are, first of all, they are the same path of each other, the same government of 2009 continuing to 2023. And thank you. And the nuclear deal, I was covering nuclear deal from 2013, traveling back and forth with all the groups were going to anywhere, to Geneva, to Oman, to Vienna, everywhere. I had a strong presence and monitoring the deal. The deal wasn't anything than saving the regime in the Middle East. For many reasons, we could say for the United States, good to have the mullahs in power. Why we should believe if President Obama said he did mistake at 2009 and haven't supported Iranian, he was genuine. Why then Biden haven't supported Iranian back to last year when there was another opportunity for them? There are many reasons here. I don't want to sound like portraying fake news or conspiracy, but the oil is important for them, still is very important. Iran with this size, with these people, with this wealth, it's too dangerous, even for our own neighbors. With respect of what Saeed says, Iran and Israel are a natural ally. There are only two countries in the Middle East that are not Arabs. Islam is the identity of most of our neighbors, which for Iranian, it's not. Maybe they are Muslims, but there is not their identity. Iran comes first for them. But still, Iran can be a threat for the natural allies of the United States in the region. Why we should believe they really want to change the regime in Iran? And also, they don't know if the regime change, who would comes in power. If a person like the late Shah, he is another big danger for their allies and even for the United States. Why they didn't try to support King Reza Pahlavi during the demonstration in Iran? Why? I'm asking regional countries, I'm asking for American policymakers. He was a face of the unity. I'm not saying this to make a propaganda, I'm just genuinely telling you the truth, but they were many different people, different voices to put him down, or sounds to the Iranian, they have many choices. They all happened because they wanted to scare the Iranian. If the regime changed, maybe there would be a civil war in Iran, maybe the Muslim community will be executed, because this secularism everyone were speaking about is to eliminating the Muslim Iranians in the country. That's what I'm always saying. A good policy is to having a good relation with everyone. It's not about we just support directly one faction and the other faction left behind. And at this point, this administration doesn't have any differences to offer Iranian than the other one. Even they really badly want to revise the deal, which they did. And about freezing this money, which you asked Alex, I guess, about, it doesn't make any differences. First of all, Iran is a very rich country. $6 billion, yes, it's a huge amount of money, but for Iran, it's nothing. And even I always believe the $6 billion would be absolutely spent for first aids, for goods, for food, for medicine, as they promised, because they don't need this money secretly spent for anything else. They have other cash resources to spend for terrorism. And maybe with this money, they just wanted to spread a little among of the Iranian, which their economy has been shattered in the past few years ago, but nothing majorly could change at the economy. President Trump, I trusted. This man was very genuine, maybe because he wasn't coming from the political clan dynasty. He just said, I am willing to sit face to face with Iranian leaders to solve the problem. They didn't want to sit down with anyone because they like to play this game, this back and forth, this mouse and cat things. As long as the United States is not sitting directly face to face with the Iranian regime's leader, none of the issues as you were looking for would be sorting out. And this can continue endlessly. And what I'm saying in Iran, Iranian cannot continue like that. They would make the changes themselves, and next time they wouldn't trust anyone who comes to portray activists for them or claim Iranian asking about ethnicity rights or religious rights or about language rights. Those things is so much past and is so much behind.
Saeed, did you have some comments to make?
In 2009, Iranians on the street, they said Obama with them or with us. So Iranians actually asked for his help. On the US policy toward Iran, I think the right policy would be maximum pressure on the regime, maximum support for the Iranian people. None of the US administration has done it so far. Only Trump administration did part of it, the maximum pressure one, but they didn't have a maximum support in place. And having a max pressure, max support policy requires you to understand that this regime must go. And I don't think that's an understanding of the US government. That's not the understanding of its intelligence community, its defense community, its foreign policy community. I think the understanding, the consensus there is that we have to deal with this regime. If we make the decision, if they make the decision that the regime must go, then you can put in place the max pressure, max support. And I think toppling the regime by the Iranian people themselves, it's possible. We at FDD actually have a very long memo on that. I think we have like 300 policy recommendation on how to implement that. But the consensus is not that the regime must go.
Alex, any comments on what do you think were the results of the Trump maximum pressure campaign?
I mean, I think, you know, for an American president to come in when you've had successive American presidents going back to Jimmy Carter in 79, trying their hands at diplomacy, for some American president to come in and say, I want to try something different, that makes total sense. And you could say maximum pressure had a good chance to work, but there are a couple of structural reasons in the way. One was, today the Islamic Republic, I hate to admit it, but everyone in this room knows it, has pretty powerful friends in the shape of Russia and China. I mean, without Chinese buying discounted Iranian oil, Iran would be in a different place than it is today. So the world has changed. If you were the United States in 2001 trying to come up with an Iran policy, your options were much better than in 2023 because the world has changed so much. So that's an unfortunate reality. But one thing that President Trump did, which for the life of me I didn't understand, is he said very early on, and he made it very clear, that I'm going to put sanctions on you, but that's about it. I'm not going to, you know, put myself in the driving seat here and come get you. And when he said that, when he said, I'm not going to go to war. And, you know, he didn't have to go with Iran, but he didn't have to say, I'm not going to go to war with Iran. That impact of keeping everything on the table would have, I think, kept the Iranian regime much more nervous than they were. As soon as the Ayatollahs in Iran learned that it's just about sanctions, they looked for going around the sanctions and buying time, and they did, and they succeeded. So again, going back to a point I've made earlier, Patrick, you cannot have a policy on Iran that will last for a Democratic administration, a Republican administration for 4 years. This is a generational challenge. Where is the committee on the US Congress on Iran? Where is there's committees on China. Where's the committee? Why don't Republicans and Democrats agree on the bottom line in terms of what they want to see on Iran? It doesn't exist. It's become a political partisan issue in this country. And that is not how you do long-term foreign policy strategic agendas. So unfortunately, that's how I see it. I hate to be the one who is kind of, I'm not being negative about it because I hope that the United States will wake up to the need for a long-term plan, because Iran naturally fits in the American part of this multipolar world that we live in. It's not going to belong to Russia and China. It belongs with the West. That's where Iran belongs. But the West needs to do a lot more creative thinking to enable that country, a very significant country of 85 million people, to come back where I think it belongs in this international order.
I want to say something about what Alex said. I don't agree that China is a very close ally of Iran. I think in the region, Saudis and UAEs are closer to China. If you just look at the number, the trade number, the trade number between Saudi and UAE with China really dwarfs what Iran sells to them. And I think that's an opportunity for US to pressure China. And we have seen that China has been pretty risk-averse when it comes to Iran. But the thing is that we really didn't push them that much. Like on oil thing, what you need to do, there are like 4 pillars. One is you have to go after the end users in China, which are private refineries. You have to sanction them. The second one is you have to go after the banks, these are again Chinese banks. You have to sanction them. You have to go after tankers and insurers. The insurers have been taken care of to a certain degree. So that's the usual way of using sanctions against Chinese oil import. And I promise you, if you do that, the import of Chinese oil will go down. And even after that, you have even a better option that requires using some military forces, short of war, but you can go and confiscate their tankers. You can actually kill 3 birds using 1 stone.
Can we get back to how Iranians look at international affairs? And I'd be very interested in your views on how do Iranians look at the sanctions on Iran? What's the attitude towards the sanctions on Iran? Camelia, why don't you start?
Sanction is not good, right? Who could say sanction is good or they like to be sanctioned? For example, my own family lives in Iran. My mother every day were complaining about the changes in supermarket, grocery shopping of her. And their incomes wouldn't increase, no one in Iran except some group of the people working with the government, or they subsidize based on their income affiliated with the regime in military or government offices or so. Sanction is not effective, but effective on the regime perhaps, but on Iranian life makes their life so complicated. The regime has its own way to raise money for its own cause and to pay its supporters, but Iranian doesn't. And we shouldn't forget, at least there are 2 million of the armed forces devoted people, I don't know, you could say they are revolutionary guards or they are private guards. They are connected with this regime. They make a huge dangers and differences. When it comes, we're speaking about the one to confront the demonstrators, the people who were complaining about the living conditions. They are all things matter to the Iranians, and it makes them be more frustrated from West when they come to street to protest, and they were saying rather than, for example, Raisi was here, some of the colleagues I guess pointed out for Onga, rather than sanctioning Iran president for murdering Iranian last summer, putting him banned, not coming to the United States, ridiculously they sanctioned former President Ahmadinejad. Okay, you can sanction entire regime's people to not come to the US, but why not Ibrahim Raisi and his people? They come September here, they went to the podium of the United Nations. Why they didn't put him on sanctions? That type of sanctions makes Iranian jubilant and very happy to see this real current leader are humiliated. That they said, okay, what is the sanction for? The goods we were shopping daily basis are increasing the prices, but the regime's people and affiliated still, they are fat, their children can study abroad, and it just makes them to not believe those sanctions be effective on the regime. And one more thing, Saeed spoken about the regional countries, the UAE and Saudi Arabia as a great example. Iranian comparing their life with their life. Every day at the social medias, they were saying, oh, look at Saudi Arabia, how well are doing this, look at what their crown prince is doing, look at the UAE. They were seeing the life quality of the neighboring countries, and they were asking why we shouldn't have this. I have an answer, because the West doesn't want the monarchies were restored in Iran, and the future of no monarchies in Iran, it would be maybe another Islamic Republic or another self-made politicians in Iran. Saeed spoke about Ms. Mohammadi's political vision on Israel. I don't care, many Iranian doesn't care, because she's no one, she is someone in human rights activism, but in politics, she cannot be the leader. And that's why I'm always saying, and Iranians saying, please don't say who is in prison is our leaders. They are not. They are very good people who are active in society, in social activism and human rights activism. But they are not a political leader. A leader should have a political vision. It shouldn't be curse this neighbor or that neighbor or confronted these people and that people. That comes from a very strong opinion makers who knows what is speaking about and make friendship with everyone. And that vision also has been well portrayed. When I'm looking at Saudi Arabia, I was working in Saudi Arabia at 2000 for Associated Press. It's unbelievable what we are seeing now in Saudi to make comparison with 23 years ago. Iranians were seeing that in the pictures too, and they were thinking why they have to step back. Those things makes my people very frustrated and makes them, they have to really gain their power back, and it coming back with the unity and with their own support, not a support comes from West.
So time is running short. Could I have a few short comments from both the other two speakers about how do Iranians view sanctions?
Look, to be honest, I think when you look at the long list of failures of the regime, sanctions is basically put on Iran because of the policies of the regime. They don't need to be sanctions. Americans don't wake up desiring to put sanctions on Iran. This is a reflection of an ideological system that has for 44 years, you know, I don't want to use a cliche, but essentially taking Iran hostage. I mean, at best, they have 15% or so of the support of the country, but that 15% support are people who get the money, who have the guns, who run the intelligence services. And the question is, how do you push back? I mean, that's where we are right now. How do you push back? And I think the time right now actually is not a bad time to think about pushing back. You have a supreme leader who's been there since 1989. His demise is an opportunity. His natural death or otherwise will be an opportunity to go in a different direction for the country. But you need to prepare for it. And you have to think hard, and that includes folks inside of Iran. It includes Iranian diaspora, 6-7 million from New Zealand to Argentina. It's a wealthy, educated, mobilized diaspora. It also includes governments in the West. Because I think, unfortunately, I hate to say this, if I was Russia, if I was China, I would do anything to keep this regime in power. I would make Raisi the next supreme leader. I'd keep this regime for another 44 years because the last thing I want is a US embassy opening up in downtown Tehran because that's not in my geopolitical interest. So you've got to recognize that this isn't just about going out in the streets, although that is part of it, but you've got to put a lot more energy, effort, and you have to have cohesion. You have to have a lot more policy cohesion across the board to get it done. So that's my 2 cents.
More like 10 cents, but Saeed.
Yeah, I think no one likes to be sanctioned, but Iranians, I think, blame the regime for the sanctions. And I think Iranians, after the JCPOA, they are finally convinced that as long as the regime is there, their economic situation is not going to significantly change. Remember that the 2017 uprising happened when the JCPOA was in place.
20 seconds.
And a last comment from Camelia.
Camelia, okay. And also, worldwide, Iranian point of views. One day, سازمان مجاهدین خلق, they are at the terrorist list of the United States, and when they met with Khatami, they were lifting up the sanctions on them. I mean, they were removing them from the terrorist list. Another day, Houthis by President Trump put it in the terrorist list. When Biden comes in power and it's not a good terms with Saudi Arabia, they were removing it from the terrorist list. Even the interpretation of the words and the dimension of using to call who is terrorist and who is not, and how they deal with Iran as an Islamic terrorist regime, maybe one day is good friends and another day maybe is a bad friend. Those things also is in the mind of the Iranian, and they can't trust any of those administration based on the evidences seen on the table. Thank you.
Well, if I may close with a personal comment, I'm a cynical Washingtonian, and I think that a lot of US policy towards Iran has been designed to meet the domestic political needs of US politicians rather than to address problems inside Iran. And so indeed, I can recall going back to why President Clinton first put sanctions on Iran in 1996. He did it in response to the Republicans taking over the Congress, and he wanted to undercut those Republicans' objections to his policies. I think Mr. Trump's policies towards Iran were very much designed to prove that he thought that Obama had been a fool, and I think Biden's policies towards Iran have been designed to prove that he thought that Trump was a fool. And so I'm afraid that a lot of U.S. policies towards Iran have not really been about Iran, but have been about domestic U.S. politics. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you all very much. Please join us for a 5-minute brief networking break before our